Hey guys, it's Penguin here, and welcome back to another gold making video. In today's video, this is episode 3 of our Midnight Preparation series and our deep dive into Enchanting. A lot of you guys requested Enchanting in the last video, and thank you for that because I secretly wanted to cover it, as it is probably my second favorite profession, and dare I say, potentially the best profession of the expansion. Of course, that is personal preference, but hopefully by the end of this video, I can convince you to not have one, but multiple enchanters. As always, this is going to be a longer style video, so feel free to use the timestamps down below to skip to whatever section you need, and of course, if you have a specific profession you want me to check out next, feel free to leave that in the comments down below. But everybody, thank you so much for your support on this series so far. I have been very excited about making these videos, and without further ado, let's jump in to some pros and cons about Enchanting. Now, in Midnight, the reason why I say Enchanting is so good is because there's so many things you can do with this profession. The biggest thing, and probably the biggest pro of Enchanting, is that it is a shuffle machine. Especially at the start of expansions, disenchant shuffling is a huge deal. And all that means is basically you craft some sort of item, and then you disenchant it with Enchanting, and then you can either use those raw materials or sell it on the auction house for some profit. This is not technically a new idea. Disenchant shuffling has been a thing basically since the start of the game, because a ton of people need enchanting mats at the start of the expansion, and the supply is very, very low. However, it has become popular ever since the profession revamp, because there are dedicated disenchanting specialization trees, meaning if you can specialize into that tree, you can make your profits even better, and that's the exact same thing for Midnight. Now, outside of shuffling, probably the biggest pro and the biggest thing about Enchanting is concentration. Now, of course, concentration crafts exist in every single profession, but specifically, Enchanting is super strong, and it should remain strong in Midnight as well. In the War Within, we saw a ton of people go for alt army situations with Enchanting because of the high profit margins, and not only high margins, but high profit gold per craft due to the nature of enchanting materials. At the start of the expansion, a lot of these high-end enchants were going for about 20,000 gold a piece, and the crafting cost was not super cheap. It was about 5k or so a piece, but with the use of concentration, that means you were making about 15,000 gold for every craft you can do. Of course, concentration is a finite resource, so the more alts that you have, the better and the more gold you can make every single day. Also, a big pro about Midnight specifically is that knowledge points are super easy to get for Enchanting, meaning the alt army setup to get enough knowledge points and all of that is very simple. Of course, at the end of the day, it kind of depends on your playstyle. If you're somebody who's not going to be running a lot of alts, this won't be as appealing to you, but it is something to keep in mind, even if you just do this on your main character, that's free gold every day that you can bring in. Now, outside of that, the biggest cons that I have is that besides concentration, Enchanting isn't the best. Of course, you do have like mana oils and things like that you can mass craft, but their margins are pretty low, and because how concentration is so popular, mass crafting enchants is generally not profitable. So if you are somebody who's going for that mass AFK crafting style, Enchanting is probably not the best for you, and the same thing applies with work orders. Besides a handful of wands, Enchanting doesn't really have anything to bring to the table. Of course, there is profession equipment, so there's a few options here and there, but it's not a main armor profession, so if you're somebody who's dedicated to work orders, Enchanting is definitely not a top pick for you. But those are kind of the pros and cons that I want to cover, and let's dive in game and talk about the basics of Enchanting in Midnight. Now, to those who are familiar with the current state of Enchanting, so if you did a lot of Enchanting in the War Within, the good news here is that Midnight is practically copy and paste. I know I've said that for a lot of professions, and it is true that a lot of professions are the same, but Enchanting is probably the profession that has the least amount of changes. And going along with that, enchanters for profession equipment will be looking to the same type of crafters as the War Within. To craft your tool, you can either craft it yourself or go to another enchanter to get your high-end profession tool, and then one of your accessories will come from tailoring, and the other one will come from jewel crafting. So whether you want to craft those yourself or just order them through the work order system, it's up to you, but it is the same professions as the War Within. Now, taking a look at recipes in game, first of all, we have our 3 main crafting materials. Up first, we have our green dust, which is called Ever-Singing Dust. Then we have our blue shards, which are radiant shards. And lastly, we have our epic crystals called dawn crystals. And these are going to be your 3 main crafting materials for enchanting. Taking a look at the trainer learned recipes, as you level up your enchanting, you're going to unlock 2 shatter abilities. The first one is breaking down that epic material into the rare material, so being able to break down crystals into shards. This is something that we see in previous expansions as well. And then same thing, we can break down shards into dust. This just allows you to, break down the better materials into the slightly worse materials. And sometimes this could be profitable depending on the price of the different items. And then in terms of items, we have the basic, this is just your basic profession tool. So this is the BOE one that you can sell on the auction house. Then we have our basic wand right here, which is also BOE. Then we have one of our mana oils. This one right here increases critical strike and haste. And you'll see once again that these emotes are showing up. Emotes are very prevalent in this profession, and these are kind of your different essences that you'll be dealing with, and we'll take a more closer look at that when we look at specializations. And then we have our basic helm enchants. So right here we have speed, we have leech, as well as avoidance. Feel free to pause and read these if you want to know more information. Then we have our basic ring enchants, basic shoulder enchants, and then of course those higher end weapon enchants. These are quite pricey. If we take a look here, this is just your basic dust and basic shards, but if you take a look at the weapons, this is requiring a lot of those motes, some of the more advanced crafting materials, and also you'll see some pretty advanced crafting materials from other professions. For example, this one uses Arcana Weave bolts coming from tailors. This one uses Flawless Lapis, which comes from prospecting. And this one right here uses a Majestic Fin. And then this one also uses another Flawless Gem from jewel crafting. And then we have those cosmetic items again. This allows you to kind of put a glow onto your shoulders. This is just the basic one you get from the trainer. And then you do have 2 housing decor. Enchanting is one of the lucky professions where you actually get 2 decor recipes from the trainer itself, so that is something that you can pick up, especially if you are somebody who's in the decor market. That's some 2 easy items you can add to your crafting queue. And that is almost it for the trainer learned recipes. The other super easy recipes that aren't necessarily right here is if we scroll down, this will look very familiar, but you have the Gleeful Glamours. They are back in action in Midnight. If you hover over this, you will see that basically all you need is a certain skill level of enchanting. Then you need to go to this trainer and pick up these recipes. Some of these require as low as level 5, and if we take a look at some others, this one requires 30 right here. I believe the highest this goes is 50. 55 right there. But this is a ton of recipes that you're going to pick up from a trainer. At the time of this video, I have not found this NPC. This NPC is different from the generic enchanter trainer. For example, right here, this is kind of the main enchanting trainer, and if you go into this recipe menu, you'll see that they're not here. So it is a very specific person you have to talk to. I have not found that person out, but it is cool that you're going to be able to just pick these up from a trainer and they're not locked by specializations. And of course, we'll talk about this more whenever we dive into specializations, but the big thing here is that each and every one of these is going to give you a first craft bonus, which means that's Artisan Moxie, as well as knowledge points, very, very easily unlocked, and look how many recipes there are. But going back to the top to cover all of the other recipes we have, the first one is your Shatter Essence. The buff system that was introduced in the War Within is the same thing here, meaning what you will have to do is salvage an item, and your option is just one of the motes. So you have the light motes, you have the primal energy, the pure void, as well as the wild magic. So you will basically use up one of these motes, and you will get a buff ranging from 5 to 15 minutes, which will buff your profession stats and make your crafts a lot more worthwhile. It's the exact same buff system from the War Within, and it is tied to a specific specialization. Besides that, we have the rare as well as the epic quality versions of that profession tool. So we have the Runed Brilliant Silver Rod right here, as well as the Thorium Rod right here. And once again, they both give you the same amount of skill. This is plus 18 and this is plus 18. The main difference is that stat bonus that you get. The Epic Tools is going to give you a lot more stats compared to the Rare. Then for the wand crafters, there is the Better Wand right here, and then you have your 2 other mana oils. So you have the Oil of the Dawn, you can pause and read that if you'd like, and then you also have this one right here. Outside of that, you have all of your high-end enchants, and these come either from specializations or a variety of world drops. If we take a look, for example, at the boots, you'll see this one right here comes from a vendor. You'll have to use Moxie as well as another resource to purchase this. I believe this is the PvP based one, but I could be wrong. I'll put a little disclaimer if I am. This one simply comes from specializations, and then this one right here is dropped by heavy trunks, and that is kind of the theme for all of these enchants. As you guys can see, the higher end chest enchants, once again, this is a treasure drop, this is a boss drop, this actually comes from Renown, and then right here, this is a specialization. So I'm not going to go through every single one per se, but I will filter through, so feel free to pause if you want to take a look at what they do. And then of course these are your high-end weapon enchants, and kind of the same theme with the War Within. The weapon enchants are a lot more expensive compared to really every other enchant. And then, of course, you also have the profession enchants, so this is all for your profession tools. You have the enchant for perception, resourcefulness, finesse, multicraft, ingenuity, as well as deafness, and this all comes from either specializations, or this one right here comes from Renown. This one also comes from Renown, specializations, and Renown. So it's not as easy as just buying it from a vendor. You will have to either unlock it through your specializations, or you'll have to have some Renown, so then you can go and buy it from a vendor. Then you just have more of the shoulder enchants right here. This is just all purely cosmetic. You have all the gleeful glamours, which we already mentioned, and then you have quite a bit of housing decor. Right here, all of these have a various number of sources. This one right here coming from world vendors. A lot of these are just random Renown rewards, things like that, but there are quite a few items here, especially compared to other professions. There are a lot of housing decor tied to enchanting. Now, with the recipes out of the way, let's talk about leveling. And leveling is actually not that bad in Midnight. You'll be able to comfortably hit about level 65, and that is just through your basic enchants. You'll see here that I crafted, 10 haste enchants, and if we take a look at something like that, it just simply cost dust. I had to craft about 5 of these. I crafted 1 wand, which if we take a look at that wand recipe, it's really not that bad. And so you can hit comfortably about 65 skill. After that, you are left with very little options, and really the best option that you have is weapon enchants. Specifically, this one right here will allow you to gain 3 skill for every craft. And so from about 65, I crafted these all the way to 100. I had to craft 12 of them, so definitely not cheap. This will be a gold sink, but it really wasn't that bad to hit 100. I didn't have to force unlock a recipe from specializations or anything like that. Of course, if there is a recipe that you do know you want from specializations, you can choose to learn that and then use that to level up. But if you're somebody who's just trying to hit 100 as fast as possible and you don't mind spending gold, what you'll need to do is just get to about 65, and then you can mass craft one of these weapon enchants, preferably this one, to get you all the way to 100. And with all of that generic information out of the way, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to that, but let's hop into these super exciting things, specializations. I'm going to be talking about 2 main specializations in this video, but I will cover kind of the broad overview of specializations in case you are somebody who wants to go into mana oils or wands or something like that. But we're really going to spend most of our time on Disenchanting as well as Concentration, Alt Army specializations. Now, up first, let's talk about Disenchanting because it's the easiest thing to spec into, and that is because you simply are going to be focusing on a single tree, and this is called Disenchanting Delegate. The thing about Disenchanting is that besides this tree right here, the most important thing is your overall skill value. All of the other profession stats do not affect disenchanting whatsoever. It is purely based on your base skill, as well as the skill and other bonuses you gain from this tree. So first things first, what you're going to want to do is get your base skill as high as possible, 100 out of 100 being the best. If you have the enchanting racial, that's even better. And then of course, you're going to want to get the best profession accessories as possible. Because only skill matters, you actually don't need epic tools for this build, because remember, epic tools and rare tools give you the exact same skill, so really all you're going to want to do is get that rare equipment that's going to give you plus 40 skill, so boom, right off the bat with having both of those maxed out, that's 140 skill in your repertoire. After that, all you need to do is focus on knowledge points to max out this tree. The first main node is just going to give you a bunch of overall skill, no matter what sort of item you're disenchanting. So right here, every single point is going to give you plus 1 skill. This is going to give you 5, 5, 10, and then the last one is going to give you 20 skill when disenchanting uncommon equipment. Once you put 5 points into this tree, you have a decision to make, and this depends on the shuffling you want to do. All of these subnodes correspond to a specific material type, and that also means a specific item type. If you go over here with Dust Deliverer, that's going to be all about Eversong Dust, or Ever-Singing Dust, I apologize, and that means this is going to be disenchanting a bunch of green quality gear. What this is going to give you is just a bunch of skill when disenchanting uncommon items, and then you're going to get even more dust right here, and that's about it. So basically all of this is just going to give you more skill, and then also more dust. And by the way, the higher skill you have, the more of a chance of getting a higher quality dust, and that is what that skill does. So the higher skill you have, the higher overall quality percentage you'll get. Remember, there's only 2 qualities, so it's quality 1 or quality 2, but the higher skill you have, the more quality 2 you're going to get. Same thing applies. This middle one right here is all about shards, so that means you're disenchanting rare quality items. This is just going to give you a bunch of skill. This right here is going to give you more shards, and this right here means that you will get even extra items whenever you disenchant that aren't shards. This normally is kind of the essence or the moat items. It can be a handful of things, but that just means more items, which means more gold every time you disenchant. Then lastly, you have the epic quality gear. Once again, this is going to give you more skill. This right here allows you to get moats, some other magical essences when you disenchant epic quality gear, more skill, and then boom, right here, more skill, and also more essence and all of that when you disenchant equipment. Now you're probably thinking, Penguin, which one do I decide to go into? And that depends on what sort of shuffle you want to do. Really, the best answer is that you want everything. You never know what disenchant shuffle is going to be popular. Dust was a big one, but shards were also very, very big in the War Within, meaning you really want all of the trees unlocked so you can go with whatever has the most profit at that current time. Each of these trees are 30 knowledge points, meaning you need 120 knowledge points to max out everything, and so if that seems like a lot and you don't want to wait for 120, you could technically split this up between enchanters. To max out a single type of item, it's only 60 knowledge points, because basically what you want to do is max out this, and then let's say we were going for rare items, we would max out the middle node, and boom, just like that, I am maxed out with Disenchanting for shards. And you're probably thinking, Penguin, 60 knowledge points seems like a lot, but remember, because you have all of these Gleeful Glamour recipes, knowledge points is really not a huge deal. Every single basic craft you do, so all of these right here is going to give you knowledge points. Right here, as you can see, the first craft bonus. So just by leveling up your profession, if you just craft one of each, that's already a lot of knowledge points in your pocket. Additionally, every single Gleeful Glamour is going to give you a knowledge point. And then on top of that, during the first week, you have all of the quest and everything like that. That's going to give you even more knowledge points. In terms of one-time sources, and there will be a knowledge point video, but treasures are back. Every single profession has 8 knowledge point treasures, which give you 3 knowledge points each, meaning that is 24 knowledge points just from the treasures that you can take about 15 or minutes to do. You just gotta fly around the world and collect all 8 of them, but boom, right there, that's another 24 points added to your arsenal. So really, you should have no issue hitting 60, if not 90 or maybe even 120 after a week or two, depending on how much you can dedicate to this character. If you don't want to wait, simply spread this across 2 or 3 characters and you're good to go. Now, the last thing I want to mention is the actual shuffle itself. I will likely have a dedicated video like I did in the War Within about shuffles and a calculator whenever that is all figured out. But the popular thing for Dust is crafting low-end profession equipment. I happen to have tailoring on this character, so if you wanted to craft a bunch of cheap grain gear, the go-to would be like things like this, for example. You would of course have to find the cheapest one. You might have to look at leatherworking or something like that, but generally you are disenchanting profession accessories for Dust. For shards, you're going to be looking at the basic BOE gear, so something like this will be insanely cheap to craft, which you can simply disenchant for shards. And then for your Dawn crystals, you're looking at Dark Moon decks. The biggest thing about Dark Moon decks in Midnight is people are going to be able to mass craft cards again. Dark Moon cards, while you can still find them through just like doing things in the open world, they are mass craftable, meaning if you can score some cheap decks, whether you're crafting them yourself or buying them off the auction house, a lot of people did that in the War Within, including myself. People were able to buy decks about 400 gold or so and disenchant them into Dawn crystals or Eternal crystals for the War Within, and that was a pretty good margin as well. And that will probably be the same sort of thing people are doing in Midnight. Now, before we transition into the other specialization, I do just want to highlight the other trees that really aren't going to be mentioned ever again, just in case you are somebody who kind of wants to go into the more unique paths of enchanting. First things first, we do have our fundamentals tree, that's what I like to call it, and this is all about your shattering buff. When you unlock this tree, you will gain the shatter ability, and by default, if you take a look, if you just pick whatever item, the actual item you use doesn't matter, so you'll just want to pick whatever's cheapest at that point in time. But when you shatter it, you will get a buff, and by default, it is a 5-minute buff, and you get 5 resourcefulness, 5 ingenuity, and 5 multicraft. To increase these, you simply are just going to put points into this tree. As you can see, every single point you put in right here, you're going to gain 1 ingenuity, and upon unlocking this right here, you're going to get, less concentration. This right here, your buff now lasts an extra 5 minutes. This is using less concentration. And then right here, another 5 minutes. So once this is maxed out, that buff will last 15 minutes instead of just 5. And then you have your dedicated node for each stat right here. This is multicraft. Every single point you put in, you'll gain some more multicraft. And then of course, this is all your multicraft buffs. So this right here is 25% more goods. This gives you actually a higher percentage of proccing, etc., for this whole tree. This bottom one is for ingenuity. Same thing goes. You'll get more ingenuity every single point you put in, and then you'll just get more concentration-based buffs right here. You will refund more concentration, more ingenuity, etc., etc. This is just all simply concentration-based. And then same thing, once again, I'm a broken record at this point, but this is for resourcefulness. So every single point you put in, you'll get more resourcefulness, and the same thing applies, you'll get more buffs related to resourcefulness as you max out these trees. This is something we will discuss in the next part of this video, but the important thing to remember is that multicraft does not apply to enchants. It only applies to non-enchanting items, even though enchanting items technically stack. Due to the fact that you are enchanting a vellum and are not just crafting an item, enchanting does not require multicraft. So if you are somebody going into enchants, do not accidentally spend all your points into multicraft, it doesn't proc. The other tree I want to mention right here is the tonics and tools. This is basically everything non-enchant crafting related. So if you are somebody who either wants to craft a bunch of illusions, so this is the cosmetic stuff, so this is like the glamours, the shoulder, cosmetic enchants, things like that, you can spec points into here. This is just going to give you skills and other stat bonuses. Over here, this is your mana oil node. So if you are somebody who wants to go into mana oil crafting, this is going to be for you. You'll unlock one of the recipes as well as just a bunch of skill and stat bonuses. And then the bottom right here, this is for equipment as well as tools. So whether you're going into wand crafting, you would go over here, or you want to craft the profession tools, you would go over here. So really, this is just everything non-enchant related. Let's say you are somebody who wants to go into mana oils. What you would do is unlock this main node. You would want to max this out. And then you, of course, would also want to max out the mana oil section. And then really, you would want to make sure you max out multicraft, because multicraft is, usable on oils. And then, of course, ingenuity, if you are going to do concentration, mana-related crafts, or, resourcefulness is also helpful. You can spec into those too. But something basic like this, if we take a look at the recipe, as you can see, we can almost max these out. We're missing basically 40 skill, and we would get that 40 skill from these profession equipment. Remember, if you have whether it's epic or rare tools, you get 40 skill from equipment. So boom, just like that, you would be able to max out mana oils. So really that applies to everything. You would just spec down into rods if you wanted to craft tools, wands, etc. But now let's move over to specializations with alt armies and enchants. Alright, now moving on to the final specialization, where we're going to be talking about actually enchant crafting and alt army concentration setup. This is where we gotta be very, very careful. There are a little bit of functionality changes here and just things that I want to bring you aware of, especially if you plan on doing concentration crafts with enchanting. First things first, let me cover the basic enchant specialization tree, as we haven't looked at that yet, and that is elevating equipment. This is very similar to the War Within, as this is all dedicated to enchants, but it is separated a little bit differently. How this works is that there are kind of three main quote-unquote factions, which is the Thalassian Talents, then we have the Amani Augments, and then we have the Haranir Heightening. That is all probably the wrong pronunciation, but what this comes down to is what sort of material each enchant uses to craft. For example, if we take a look at the Helm enchants right here, this is a part of the Heightening specialization, and you'll see that the main mote that it uses is the Primal Energy. If we go to the other Helm right here, which is under Amani Augments, it will use Wild Magic, and then right here, the Talents will use the Mote of Light. And that is basically how those sort of factions appear to the different items. If we go to the Ring enchants, for example, right here, this is Amani Augments, so it's using Wild Magic. Right here, this is Heightening, so it's using Primal Energy. And then these two right here are both the Talents, which is using a Mote of Light. So at the end of the day, yes, they have some fancy names, but it really just comes down to that sort of crafting reagent, but at the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter per se. And then every single subnode is the same across the three branches, but it's just for that specific enchant type. So for example, right here, this is going to improve your crafting for Amani-based weapon, ring, and chest enchants. This is for Amani-based helm, shoulder, and boots, as well as Amani profession tools. If we take a look at the talents tree over here, once again, we have the weapon, ring, and chest. Then we have the shoulder, boots, and helm, and then we have profession tools. So basically, these three subnodes are the same groups of armor slots. It's just tied to that specific recipe type. But thankfully, you don't really have to overthink it that much, because Blizzard has actually put what specialization improves that enchant on the enchant itself. So if you look at a best in slot list for monks per se, and you say, okay, they all recommend silver mending, all you have to do is go to Silver Moon's mending right here. It says, okay, I need the talents tree, and then I need Eversong empowerments. And if we take a look, we go to the talents, and then we go to Eversong empowerments, and that makes sense because this improves shoulder enchants, and this is a shoulder enchant. So you don't have to overthink it too much. Now, the first step, of course, for every alt army / concentration craft is figuring out what enchant you really want to focus on. There's not really a right or wrong answer. What I highly recommend is just taking a look at the best in slot class list whenever they come out, or the gear list for the classes, and figure out the most sought after enchants. Ring enchants were very popular in the War Within, so I'm going to use that in today's example. And specifically, I'm going to use this one right here, which I have already favorited, so it's moved to the top. First things first, you technically need to unlock this recipe, and this is one of the recipes that come from Specializations, and if we take a look, you unlock it right here. So what we'll have to do is put in 5 points here, and oops, I ran out of knowledge points. Let's fix that real quick. We need to put 10 points here, and then boom, just like that, with 15 knowledge points, I have unlocked that recipe. From here, you have a decision to make. Remember, how concentration works is that concentration basically makes up for your lack of skill. So the more skill you have, the less concentration you have to use, and vice versa. Because of this, the best thing that you can do up first is first of all level up your enchanting as fast as possible, and you're going to want to make sure you have at least rare profession tool equipment. Remember, if you have either rare or epic quality, if you have all 3 items, that's going to give you 40 skill. So right off the bat, that is just 40 skill from just having those tools, which is very, very useful. Because I happen to be a blood elf, I have the racial, which is why I can be 105 enchanting, but you know, that's just a 5 bonus. It's not technically required, so you might have 100 out of 100. Either way, maxing that out is the best way to get 140 skill by just having the tools and having your enchanting maxed out. Now, from here, you have another decision to make. We can either continue to spec into this equipment, and that's going to give us a lot of skill, which of course should lower our concentration, or we can go over here and focus on the ingenuity node. Now, you may have a decision made up in your mind, but there's kind of a trick here. Concentration, even though it looks like it will go down a lot, it is actually very, very hard to get your concentration down per craft in Midnight. If we take a look right here, as you guys can see, currently with our 103 skill, it is going to, or 135 skill, it is going to cost us 456 concentration for us to craft a quality 2 to make up for our lack of skill. Now, of course, you're probably thinking, oh, well, we can probably get this down to like 200 or so if we just keep upping our skill, but it's a lot harder to do that. For example, what we're going to do first is just put in 19 points right here. Oh, I misclicked. If we put 19 points in here, that is going to just give us 19 skill for all of those 19 points, plus another 5, plus another 5, and another 10. So if we apply this right here, as you guys can see, our skill has gone up to 174, but our concentration requirement has only gone down a few points. And so something that I think they've done in Midnight to kind of combat these concentration crafts is that they've made this concentration very, very hard to get down. Throughout the specializations, you've probably realized that a lot of things, say right here, use 5% less concentration, and that is the bonuses that we really, really want to be after. So what I highly recommend is dumping 20 points into here to get to that final buff, and if we do that right here, as you guys can see, yes, we've gone another 20 skill up, but our concentration has gone down from like 450 something down to 427. So we've gone down about 30 points or so, you know, from that 5% buff. Which means what I highly recommend for these alts is first doing this for whichever sort of, you know, spec path you want to do. I highly recommend dropping in 35 points to not only unlock the node, but to also get this final buff right here for concentration. Of course, if you're going for profession tools, you can do the exact same thing, but I highly recommend dumping 35 points like this. After that, what I think the most important thing that you can do is go into your generic buff tree and fully maxing out this ingenuity node. What you'll have to do is put in 5 points, and then I highly recommend maxing this out. What this is going to do is give you more ingenuity, and remember, ingenuity is the chance to get you refunded concentration. So this is going to allow you to not only increase your chance, but this is also going to allow you to get more concentration refunded whenever that does proc, and that's going to be very, very useful. And if we take a look here, you'll see that our concentration hasn't gone down a ton. It's at 418, and really that's just because right here unlocking this we consume 2% less concentration. But what this ingenuity does is, if we take a look right now, our ingenuity is only at 4%. That's just because that's our just base stat. Remember how this works is that you have to shatter to get the buff. So right here, if we go and just choose an item to shatter, boom, right here, this is going to increase our ingenuity by 40. So now if we take a look, that 4% went to 80%. Now, of course, this seems low, and that's just because, remember, I don't have profession equipment. Profession equipment will give me more ingenuity, and then I can also make myself an ingenuity enchant and apply that to my tool to give me even higher. But remember, this is going to allow us to refund concentration. And so with this maxed out how it is, you'll see we have an 8% chance to get a refund, and we'll get 70% of our concentration back. So remember, that sort of thing is important as well. But we want to continue to get that concentration down, so the next thing we're going to want to do is actually put more points into this base shatterer right here. Once again, I know a lot of people are thinking, all right, I want to get my skill higher and higher, but I'll show you why that's not important in just a second. If we go over here and we put in another 5 points, and we go back over here, as you guys can see, we're now down to 405. And then right here, this is going to be another 5%, so we need another 10 points. And we are now down to 382. So that is still pretty high, but that is way better than that 456 that we were seeing earlier. Now you can continue to put points into here, that's just going to increase your shatter, and look, every single point you put in here, you are gaining ingenuity, so that is beneficial, but as you guys can see at the state we're at about 10% ingenuity, and just remember, we're still missing those skills and things like that, but we're definitely at a better spot than we were. But alright, right now we are currently at a 50-point investment on this tree, and over here we're at our 35, so we're still only at an 85-point investment. That is a little steep, so it might take a week or two to get there, but still 85 points is not that bad. But really the goal here is to get all of these percent unlocks, because skill itself is really not going to do it. But to really highlight this, let's say we do want to get as much skill possible. To do this, let me actually craft a tool right here. I'm going to craft myself this epic tool right here. Let me get the items for it. Here we go. Let's say I do craft this for myself. What this is going to do is give me 18 skill. This item right here currently doesn't give me any. So if we take a look here and we use our quality 1 reagents and we apply this right here, as you can see, we've only gone down 1 concentration. So that 18-point investment right here only marked us down 1. So as you can see, the skill itself is just, it's not bringing down our concentration like it does in the War Within. So really, this is kind of the most optimized path. About 85 knowledge points is going to mark down your concentration a lot, and this is something that you can, hopefully if you get a proc, you can craft maybe 3 or 4 of these in one sitting, and then you'll have to move on to your other alt. But really, just to show you once again, let's say we do want to max this out. If we dump all of our points into here and we use high quality reagents, we are only 15 points away from being able to maximize this craft. You would just, if we had the other profession accessories, we would be able to maximize this craft, meaning we could guarantee a quality 2 by using quality 2 reagents. But if we go back to quality 1, as you can see, our concentration is still requiring at 375. So even though we dumped all of those knowledge points and got a ton of skill increase, it's only gone down to 375, which of course is better than 382 or whatever it was, but that's still only like a 7 to 8 point drop for as much skill as we got. So yeah, that's kind of the thing that I wanted to highlight. I know this is more of a rant, but hopefully this makes sense and kind of gives you a path on what you want to follow, whichever enchant you focus on. But yeah guys, that's about it for today's video. This has been long enough and I will ramble and ramble on if I don't stop now, but hopefully this gives you a better idea on how concentration and alt armies and all of that is looking like in Midnight. As always, if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. I try to make these as clear and as simple as possible, but I do understand this sort of system is a little bit more complicated, so if anything isn't clear, please let me know. Please also let me know what sort of profession you want to see next, and as always everybody, thank you guys so much for the support, and as always, have a good day.